Hello, welcome to another season of Inside the Birds Pre-Game Live. We are presented by Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City. It's the exclusive Jersey Shore resort of Inside the Birds. The Philadelphia Eagles today will open their defense of the NFC East and the NFC in New England to face the New England Patriots at Gillette Stadium. I'm Geoff Mosher, as usual, with my host, my Inside the Birds co-host, Adam Caplan. And joining us, as always, we have the best Eagles analyst tag team in the business. You know who they are. It's former Eagles wide receiver Jason Avant and our tape breakdown master, Greg Cosell from ESPN's NFL Matchup Show, senior producer at NFL Films. Welcome back, fellas. We got a lot to talk about. It's a new season. I'm excited. I'm sure you guys are, and it's time to break down some Eagles football. I have to start with this. Jason, I got to start this question with you. Week one, right? Every time I've ever done an interview with any coach, any football player, anybody in the business who either played or coached or even executive would say, hey, every week is just like it's one game at a time. No week is different than any other week. But week one, Jay, as a football player in your career, was there anything more special about it? Were you extra fired up? Was it a more emotionally, a cauldron of emotions inside you for week one?
Yeah, because you're putting in all of that work with your teammates. You're hitting your teammates. You don't get an opportunity to hit other people. Now, it's even more exciting for this group of players because they don't get a chance to play much in the preseason at all, like when it comes to live action. So you're going to see a lot of mistakes and things like that. But these guys are fired up to play a different team and to actually get some football action, tackling, face mask, button press, that type of stuff. So I'm excited, and the first game is a lot more important than most games.
What do you have a memorable first game? Was it the first game of your rookie year or the first game of any season that stands out?
No, so my first game that I remember my first game versus the Giants. I didn't play, but I was the best cheerleader in the history of cheerleaders. And I remember all the veterans coming up to me saying, dude, I can't wait for you to get your opportunity because we have never seen a person run out in the middle of the field. Coach Reed almost killed me about 5 times. Like guys are making plays. I was chest bumping in the middle of the field. I remember it. That was that game where Eli Manning came back in the fourth quarter to Plexico Burris.
Oh yeah.
In that 5 snaps of zero coverage with Jim Johnson.
Oh yeah, I believe Javon Curse tore his ACL in that game too. That is a memorable game. Yeah, yep. Well, you know what? I did not expect to hear a former wide receiver talk about the anticipation of hitting people in the opening game, but yes, that's the type of player you were. No, that's good stuff, man. And you know what? It's been a long off season. There's been a ton of changes that we're going to get into. It's really good to have football back. And so for our fans who are new to the show, welcome. It's been a great off season having more people flock to Inside the Birds. We can't wait to break the game down. Just to let everybody know, our next pregame show, because it's a short turnaround, Thursday night, will be at 5 p.m. And by week 3, this show that you're watching right now in a nice screen, we might have a different location behind us. But first 2 weeks, we're doing it like this. So while you're enjoying the show, please make sure you subscribe. Please like it. Please share it on whatever platform you're watching it on. And we will be able to take your score predictions like we usually do, and we'll be able to answer any questions that you might have. If you leave them in the chat box, we will try to get to your questions at some point during the show. You can direct them to all of us or any of us in particular. So let's get into this. We always start this show off with sort of a big picture look of the game ahead, not necessarily getting right into the X's and O's. So Jason, I'll go back to you. This Eagles team, right? Offensively, it looks very similar and should be equally as dynamic, if not more, with some of the additions they made. Defensively, we're talking about a rebuild up the middle. So as a former player, when you have so much newness with coaches and players on one side of the ball, do you expect that comes with growing pains and a learning curve, or should there be an expectation that there is no excuse? You just got to hit the ground running. How is that for a player to get used to such a new teammates around them, new scheme, new everything, new play caller?
One, there are no excuses in the NFL. Every game is a job interview for coaches and players, so there are no excuses. However, you don't expect for this group of young players with Zach Cunningham and Nakobe Dean, Christian Ellis, and a lot of the guys up front to come in and do exactly what the guys that made it to the Super Bowl did last year with all of that knowledge, those games played. So you don't expect that from them. And here's the other thing. Like I said before, you only get so many opportunities to get live action. So this first 3 games of the year is basically your dress rehearsal for the rest of the season. Hopefully you can win these games, but there's going to be a punt returns and kickoff returns, stuff you just don't see at the end of the football season. There are going to be a lot of big plays, things like that occur. So yes, there's going to be some mistakes by our guys. Hopefully they're not big enough to lose us the football game.
Right.
Yeah, so you're going to see, guys not play the best,
Sure.
when it comes to tackling.
Sure. And we'll get in further into the show, all of the new personnel, the scheme, and what that might look like. Greg, from a tape breakdown, nobody watches more NFL tape than you. I always wonder, though, when you watch week 1 tape compared to, further in the season, do you see like discernible things that just scream week 1 to you?
I've been asked that a lot, Jeff, over the years. And when I watch tape, I don't think of it like that. What I think about more is, and particularly with new coaches, let's say, or new personnel, I'm very much more conscious of that, as opposed to, it's week 1, so I'm going to see maybe a mistake or a lack of execution. I think more in terms of new tactics. So I'm really excited for this game. Obviously, that's the game we're talking about, and that's the one Eagles fans care about. But I'm really excited to see what the Eagles defense is going to look like, not just from a personnel standpoint. I mean, obviously, they're, as you mentioned, Jeff, so correctly, they're going to look different up the middle. But I'm curious to see what kind of tweaks Sean Desai is going to have, because no coordinator does the exact same thing as a previous coordinator. Even if they want to keep the general methodology somewhat the same, no coordinator does exactly the same thing as Jay knows. It's just there's going to be some differences. And on the other side of the ball, and we'll get into this, the opponent they're facing, we'll get into this more as we move along. I am so anxious to see what the Patriots offense looks like with Bill O'Brien back, because that's going to be different than it was a year ago. And, Bill O'Brien, through his history and his background with his track record, there are certain things I think we'll see based on what he's done in the past that were really not a major part of what the Patriots did a year ago. So those are the kinds of things, Jeff, that interest me more than, it's week 1, so maybe I'm going to see some mistakes, or, I don't think in those terms when I watch tape.
Greg, that was a very in-depth, well-articulated answer to my question, but all I got from that was that I'm very predictable and cliche in my question asking, because you said that's the question you get asked all the time.
So should I
have to do better?
Jeff, should I have said, hey, Jeff, you're very predictable and cliched, so here's a good answer?
I think you already did, basically, but no, it's okay. Adam, just to piggyback off what Jason and Greg said, I mean, obviously, when we look going into this game and this season, the questions really are about the Eagles defense. I imagine that would be the number one thing on your mind today.
Yeah. In fact, I remember when this group took over in 21, or most of this group, some of these guys have left. And we saw one thing. We thought Gannon was going to do certain things. The mirror match coverage, which we saw last year, we thought we were going to see a lot of that in year 1. We didn't. It was because it was based on the personnel that they had at the time. But if we fast forward to this year, you've got 7 starting lineup changes, 2 coordinator changes. We're going to get into some of the defensive coaches, the assistant coaches, as we go along here. Matt Patricia no longer part of the Patriots; he's part of the Eagles now. You just don't know how this is going to work in. I'm kind of fascinated, because we'd said leading up to training camp there's a lot of mystery about the players and how they're going to be used and all the changes. I think Jeff, the coaching changes are fascinating here, because Greg talked about it. We talked about it when Gannon came in here running the Fangio system. They don't all run it the same. They all run it their own way. And it just throws a question about what this thing's going to look like. But that's the fascination of this season.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, between the 4 offensive and defensive coordinators in total in this game, 3 of them are sort of new. Yeah. I mean, obviously Bill's done it before. Yeah. Sean Desai has done it before, but new to this year for what they're doing. So that I think throws a huge kind of curveball into trying to figure out what's going to happen.
Can I add one thing, Jeff, with that?
You may.
Based on what Adam said.
Yep.
I think the Fangio system has become a little like the West Coast offense. in that people just throw that out now as if the Fangio system, everybody does exactly the same thing.
Right.
And I can tell you from watching tape, and I know Jay would know this as well, that's not really true. I mean, are there certain things that are foundational? Yes. But, you could almost argue that Gannon's defense last year, even though we all know Vic Fangio was a consultant, that Gannon was more of like a half sibling of Fangio with what he did, as opposed to running the exact Fangio system.
Yeah. Right.
And, and even Fangio himself has sort of changed it a bit over the years. And there may be 8 or 9 coaches as we start today, week 1 on Sunday in the league, where people say, oh, they're going to run the Fangio system. But like I said, it's like the West Coast offense. There's so many permutations of it now that it's not as if there's just 1 or 2 things that everybody does exactly the same thing.
Right. You say half sibling. Eagles fans right now say redheaded stepchild when they talk about Jonathan.
It might be the same thing, but yeah, you know what I mean. Yeah.
Of course, absolutely. All right, let's do what we do. At the start of the show, we get into the injuries. So we will move on to our injury report here. Injuries for the Philadelphia Eagles. Okay, they're good. So injuries for the New England. No, I'm just kidding. But there are no actual injuries. Nobody is on the injury report. We had 2 cornerbacks missing some time in practice this week, a little bit just because of an illness, and that was Mario Goodrich and Josh Jobe, but they are not on the report. They're good to go. We do know that Hassan Reddick did have a thumb surgery earlier in training camp. He will play today. He'll have that thumb wrapped. And we'll really, that's sort of the thing that we look for in this game is Hassan Reddick good to go with his thumb wrap? Jason, I know you're not a defensive player and you certainly weren't a rush end, but playing with that kind of wrap on his hand, do you think that'll be a major inhibitor or something he's just going to figure out? I know guys like to grab jerseys and shoulder pads. Is that going to matter?
Yeah, when it comes to rush ends, they figure out ways, man. Those guys can bend. I've seen guys play with 2 clubs on their hands and they get to quarterback. If you're a guy like Hassan Reddick that's constantly moving his hands like E Honda from Street Fighter, I don't see it being that big of a problem. So I think he'll do just fine.
Now, you just blew a perfect opportunity to make a Hassan Chop reference there.
Hassan Chop.
You went E Honda, but that's okay. That's fine. As for elevations, not surprisingly, guys, the Eagles elevated both the punter, so they actually have one for this game, and Aaron Sipos. That was nice of them to do. And then punt returner Britton Covey. So both of these guys were elevated. Those were the 2 elevations the Eagles were allowed to use. And both of those players, Britton Covey and Aaron Sipos, will now only have 2 elevations left. Adam, I'm not surprised. I don't think you are either that Britton Covey got elevated. I don't think they wanted to go in with 4 wide receivers only and then have Olamide Zaccheaus be the punt returner and the 4th wide receiver.
Yeah, no, and Covey will serve as the 5th receiver. That's the other part of this. Right. Now, Zaccheaus would be the backup punt returner as he was all of training camp. So that's where that is. And Sipos was activated as we expected. But here's the thing, though. They worked out a bunch of punters over the last 2 weeks. Sipos has got to do a good job here. If he doesn't, they have that tape. They have that workout tape, and they know what these guys look like. So they worked out a bunch of veteran punters. So he could be on borrowed time here. But as we noted 3 weeks ago, this is their plan all along. They were going to go with him just the way they did it off the practice squad. But as you mentioned, if he's doing well, though, let's say for 3 weeks he's doing well, then they have a decision to make, or they can't elevate him after that. So they can only sign him off the practice squad after week 3.
All right, we'll see the future of that after week 1. Let's move on to the New England Patriots. They have far more injuries than the Eagles and some significant ones. First off, they are without their starting right tackle, Riley Reif, who is on injured reserve. He got his leg rolled on in a preseason game. So it's leg knee area that put him on the shelf, along with wide receiver Tyquan Thornton, their 2nd-year receiver, who's one of their few receivers who can beat a defense over the top. So in place at right tackle, they are playing, Adam, you love this guy, right? Calvin
Anderson.
Anderson.
Yeah, a original Patriot. He was signed as an undrafted free agent in 19. He's bounced around. He's had some starting experience with Denver. He backs up right or left tackle. But the big story here is, without Reif and Anderson starting, they have 0 experience behind their 5 starting offensive linemen. A couple of their offensive linemen, like Michael Wenu and Cole Strange, were dealing with injuries in training camp. So they have no experience at all of their backups. So this is a problem here. This is where as we get through the show here today, this is where the Eagles will have an advantage, just because of the guys not practicing a lot in training camp, as we mentioned on our show earlier this week. And just this is where the matchups are. The Eagles clearly have an advantage. Their defensive front versus this makeshift offensive line here.
Right. As you mentioned, the guards for the Patriots, Michael Onwenu, Cole Strange, are actually listed as questionable today. One has a knee, the other has an ankle. It sounds like they're going to try to give it a go, but obviously a little hobbled. Same thing with Ramondre Stevenson. He was listed as questionable. Their running back, he had an illness. Sounds like he's going to be able to go. Devontae Parker, I believe there was a report in the last few minutes that he's going to be out with a knee injury, which has him questionable on the report. Adam, did you have anything on that?
Yeah, in fact, he missed a lot of training camp with this knee problem. So if he does not play today, it's Kendrick Bourne, who's really their third receiver, Juju Smith-Schuster, Kayshon Boutte, and Demario Douglas. Boutte and Douglas are rookies. And of course, Matthew Slater, who's a Hall of Fame special teamer, he doesn't really play he doesn't play receiver.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Mike Gesicki's back from his injury, so perhaps we see a lot of 12 personnel today instead of 11 because they're down at receiver a little bit.
Greg, real quick, I believe Boutte, he's a rookie, correct? He's someone that I believe
yes.
You sort of liked coming out of the draft that wasn't getting a lot of attention. Is that accurate?
Well, Boutte was an interesting guy because the end of his freshman year, he had a really, really big game against I forget who it was against, but he had a really big game, and everybody said, well, he's now the big time LSU receiver, the next one. And then he had issues his sophomore year and junior year. But I watched his tape pretty closely because, it's LSU. He's a receiver, and he's a really interesting guy. He's got talent. I mean, to me, when I did him, I came away thinking that if he were to reach his ceiling, and that's a total unknown, by the way, so I don't want people to think I'm saying he's this guy, but if he were to reach his ceiling, I thought that there was a Stephon Diggs comparison to be made. And it's easy right now for people to say, oh, you're crazy. But people should remember that Stephon Diggs, when he came out of Maryland, was a 5th-round pick and the 146th player chosen in the draft. So it's not as if Stephon Diggs was a top 20 pick that everybody thought would be a star. So again, Boutte's also had some personal issues because he initially said, Jeff, that he was coming back to LSU. And then, as Adam probably knows, some stuff happened, which maybe Adam knows the details. I don't think it was really reported, but some stuff happened in which it was pretty clear that he couldn't go back to LSU and he had to enter the draft.
All right. So now he is with the Patriots, and probably we'll see some kind of, what we assume, some prominent role with the injuries that they've got. On defense, the only major injury that we have for the Patriots is Jack Jones, their cornerback, is going to be out with a hamstring. What does that mean for their starting cornerback tandem, Adam?
Well, actually, he wasn't out of starter.
I'm sorry. I meant for their depth at corner.
Oh, yeah, not great. Now, here's the thing, because Christian Gonzalez was in and out of the starting lineup. He's their first-round pick. You got Jonathan Jones, has been there forever, and, of course, Jalen Mills. It would be interesting to see how they deploy this cornerback group. Jones would be a backup, but would play and also play on special teams. So that's the thing that they go through here, is what the rotation is going to be like. And Gonzalez, Jeff, as you and I know, not everyone liked Christian Gonzalez. This guy was sort of a polarizing corner.
Yes.
And we know Greg obviously could chime in here. This is a guy that's fascinating because people in scouting were all over the map on this guy.
Well, Greg, you liked
again, Gonzalez. I heard things about it was more a personality thing.
Right.
A lot of people, once he was interviewed, because he's kind of a quiet kid, he doesn't come across with swagger, which a lot of people want corners to come across with swagger, and he's not that kind of personality. But on tape and traits wise, he's everything you want. He's over 6'1", he's about 200 pounds, he runs, he's got every the athletic testing measurables were really, really good. His tape at Oregon was really, really good. I saw some of him in the preseason, not a lot, and he looked exactly the same. He's smooth as silk. He's fluid. He transitions easily. He's got great change of direction. He'll certainly start, and he'll get a test today, obviously, against two high-quality wideouts in A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. But, he's going to start. Now, it's my understanding, guys, you mentioned Jalen Mills. Jalen Mills, I believe, has been moved to safety. And I think
he's gone back and forth.
He will end up being their post safety a good part of the time because they don't have another player in the secondary that can really replace Devin McCourty at post safety, because McCourty played probably 95% of the snaps on the back end at post safety, because they're much more of a single high safety defense than a two shell split safety defense. And if you just look at their secondary and their depth, they don't really have another player who can play post safety on the back end.
All right, good stuff. We're starting to break it down already. Go ahead, Jay.
What I'll say about Christian Gonzalez and watching this tape last year and what the coaches were saying, people were saying, is that he doesn't have dog in him.
Yeah.
And that terminology is that, you know, basically a kid with heart that's willing to step up and fight. And they like all the measurables, but that determining factor, if you're going to be willing to step in someone's face and play with toughness and play with grit, everyone was questioning that, not his ability.
Right. All right. Great stuff. Look, we're already starting to break it down. So why don't we get right into it? Break down this game. The Patriots and the Eagles, they are ready to rumble in week 1. Let's continue this topic of the Eagles defense. Is it a retool or a rebuild? Are they just replenishing and ready to hit the ground running? Or is this up the middle going to be an entirely different style and also impact for this Eagles defense? We know that one of their new coaches is their senior consultant, senior defensive consultant, Matt Patricia, who used to work under Bill Belichick for quite many years. Last year, he was their offensive play caller, and now he is with the Eagles on their defense as a senior advisor. Speaking of Bill Belichick, the 6-time Super Bowl head coach, champion head coach of the Patriots, had this to say this week about the Eagles defense. Oh, you know what? That's my fault. We were going to scrap the audio clip. So I will just, that's my fault. What he basically said was that the Eagles had by far the best pass rush. And he wasn't talking about the past. He said this year, you look at what they've got up front, they have by far the best pass rush in the league. Jason, I'm going to ask you, when you look at the Eagles defense right now compared to last year's personnel, though, knowing that they are up front, but knowing what they're doing on the back end, your reaction to the Eagles defense right now is what?
Extremely good. I still think that the Eagles defense will be extremely good, even though that there is some switching of personnel. When you consider that you lose Javon Hargrave, right, but you replace him basically with 2 first-round picks from a national champion with a lot of upside, and you consider all of the veterans that you have that have all the experience that they have, and then Hassan Reddick playing out of his mind. If he continues to go in the direction that he was toward the last 5-6 games of the season, this defense, even though you're I won't say as good at linebacker and or safety, but all of us know if the defensive line's getting home, those other positions are not as important. So I can see many guys getting up to our smaller linebackers when it comes to Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter.
Greg, based on what Jason said there, we know Javon Hargrave is gone. He signed a big, huge deal with the 49ers in free agency. We know they picked Jalen Carter in the first round. We'll get to him in a minute. But we know Nolan Smith was also a first-round pick. In general, seeing other teams and seeing the Eagles as much as you do, what are you sort of most interested in learning week 1 about this Eagles defensive front? And what do you expect?
Well, the thing that intrigues me the most, and this also gets into how the Patriots choose to play, I think whether it was Adam or you, Jeff, mentioned that we could see a lot of 12 personnel. We'll get into that more. Yeah. But I'm curious to see what the Eagles sub front looks like, because, you know, is Jalen Carter going to be playing in the sub front? Is he going to be a D tackle as a pass rusher when they go nickel, or does Sean Desai play more dime? Who knows? You know, that's another thing we don't know. Is Jordan Davis going to play in sub fronts? Obviously, he did not a year ago. You know, at some point, I would think when you trade up to draft him with the 13th pick in the draft, you expect him to play more snaps. Is this, now that he's starting his second year, does it start now where he plays more snaps? I don't think he'll play 60 snaps, but will he play in obvious pass rush situations, 3rd and 9? I think we don't know that yet. So that's what I'm most curious to see, you know, what Sean Desai does with personnel with the front when they go to their sub fronts in clear long yardage and 3rd down situations.
Right. And with all those injuries we mentioned that the Patriots are facing on the offensive line, Really fascinated to see if they're able to the Eagles are able to overwhelm the Patriots up front with whatever sub packages and rush packages that they bring in. Greg, you made a point earlier also, and I'll transition to Adam here because we were ready to talk about this. Greg said not everybody plays the same version of the Fangio concept. Everyone has their own fingerprints. We've talked about that on Inside the Birds. And even at training camp, now you can't just automatically assume everything you see at camp is going to be the same in the regular season. But wouldn't you say there were some differences in line deployment and alignment that we were already noticing?
Yeah, the first practice, and then we saw throughout camp occasionally, we did not see a lot of 5-man fronts. If you remember last year, every single game, regular season through the Super Bowl, they started 3 defensive tackles. I didn't see that in base a lot. I didn't see it a lot. I saw it occasionally. So as you brought that up, Jeff, I am wondering going forward, what's this going to look like? Because remember, they have 7 defensive tackles. We know they can only dress 4 or 5. That's the way it works in the National Football League. You can't dress everybody when you're a 53-man roster. So we're looking forward to seeing, as Greg talked about, depending on the personnel grouping, how many D tackles are on the field, how many overhangs are they going to have. This is fascinating. This is the kind of stuff that we're looking forward to seeing. And then a coaching source who knows this group from another team said one of the things that he had heard, at least he thought Desai would do based on his past, is sometimes the edge rushers, as they would go rush, would try to disrupt any running back coming to the backfield. As they would go to the quarterback, they may push the guy and go to the quarterback. That obviously didn't hurt Robert Quinn from having 18 or 19 sacks 2 years ago under
Yeah.
But I'm just wondering again if we're going to see this based on what we've heard.
The bullseye approach that Belichick actually did in the Super Bowl when they beat the Rams. That was his approach to take away Marshall Faulk. He decided Marshall Faulk was the most important element of the passing game with the Rams, and when Faulk was offset, now obviously not when he was an I formation back, but when he was offset, they had the edge players. One was Willie McGinnis at the time. I can't remember the other one in that Super Bowl, but they would just go right after Marshall Faulk and prevent him from being a primary receiver. So
that's classic Belichick.
That's classic Belichick. Yeah.
In general. Best rerouting team in the league for sure.
Yeah,
sure. And it's classic NFL to steal those concepts and implement it into whatever the newest thing is. So we will definitely look for that today. That's a really interesting nugget, Adam. I think that might be hard to catch right when you're watching it in person, unless it's in your mind and then you see it and then you go back on tape and watch it. So that'll be fascinating to see in reverse.
Real quick on that, I look for it in camp. I couldn't tell because we don't have instant replay for us media.
Right,
the club has it. But on the coach tape, that's something that we'll look into, and we'll ask Greg obviously if he sees it. But it just throws another wrinkle into a lot of mystery. This is going to be fun today. See what happens.
Absolutely. All right, let's talk a little bit about Jalen Carter. So some people said it wasn't fair when the Eagles got Jalen Carter. Others kind of said the rich got richer. Whatever the case, the Eagles had 2 first-round picks. They were able to move up 10th overall from 10th overall to 9th and get the Georgia defensive tackle. He was widely considered the top defensive prospect in the draft. Greg, I remember during one of your shows on the Inside the Birds platform, we call it the Intel with Greg Cosell. I believe you called him a player with very few discernible flaws, if any. And then you went through and listed all the things that you really liked about Jalen Carter. So for our new audience who may not have caught that version of the Intel with Greg Cosell, give us your scouting report on Jalen Carter, please.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard not to like Jalen Carter, Jeff, when you watch the tape. Again, then you get into the only thing you really get into is how many snaps he would play in the league. Obviously at Georgia, they don't really play many of their defensive linemen 50, 60 snaps because they've got 8 5-stars. So, a lot of guys play. But he's got the athleticism, the quickness, the explosiveness, the strength, the power. He can line up in multiple positions along the defensive front. He's a disruptor as a run defender and a pass rusher. I mean, there are great examples we saw in college where he just physically manhandled interior offensive linemen. I felt watching his tape at Georgia that he was scheme transcendent, that he could play if you're playing a 1-gap system where you, let's say, line him up as a 3 technique or a 1 technique, and you want him to be a gap shooter, he could do that. I felt that he could play in 2-gap fronts if you choose to go that route on a given play. I thought he had strength and power to control and displace offensive linemen on contact. I mean, to me, he was a big time prospect. You know, the other stuff, you know, I don't know about. Adam probably knows more about it. I mean, we hear stuff, but that's why he dropped in the draft. He was, to me, a top 3 player in this draft, if you're just talking about the traits that he showed on tape.
Is there a comp? Is there someone who jumped out? You're like, oh, this guy reminds me of blank.
You know what? No, and it's funny you asked me that because I always get asked that about all players that when I do tape.
Sure.
And you know, more often than not, someone will jump out and I'll go, oh, he reminds, like I mentioned with Keyshawn Boutte, you know, that I thought he could be, you know, Diggs if he reached his ceiling. But when I finish watching a guy, and Adam knows this, I don't, you know, like put my head in my hands and try to think for 20 minutes who he reminds me of. Either it hits me or it doesn't. And
Gotcha.
Carter didn't. There was not one guy that I immediately thought of.
Actually, you gave me one, Greg. You might remember this about a month ago. You mentioned Gerald McCoy. Did you know?
Oh, well, you know what? It's interesting. I think what I said was that he was a little bit of a combination of McCoy and Sue.
Yes, Sue was mine.
Yes,
yeah,
because
good.
McCoy, when he came out of Oklahoma, he was more, and Jay will remember this, he was more of an athletic gap shooter, whereas Sue was more of the physical power, you know, point of attack strength player. So I think Carter can do both those things.
I like to put my 2 cents in there. I think that when you get excited about Jalen Carter, when you hear his teammates, like that's it. Like when you hear the offensive linemen talk about Jalen Carter, you think they're talking about Aaron Donald. And, you know, so the offensive lineman, Jordan Mailata, goes out and says that he's one of the smartest players that he's played against up front. You know, Darius Slay called him a baby rhino. Rashard Penny called him that the only player that I've seen dominate like him is Aaron Donald. Like you get excited when you hear this type of this is lauding a young player. You usually don't hear this. So there's definitely something to it. So I'm excited to see him play today.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It's funny. Greg mentioned in his scouting report there the ability to displace offensive linemen and just manhandle them. And anybody who saw the Eagles-Browns joint practice this summer witnessed that with Joel Bitonio, who's I believe, a Pro Bowl guard for the Browns. Now, it's just one snap. I'm not trying to, you know, make too much of it, but that was an example of the strength that the man possesses. So, Jason, I'll stay with you on this. Javon Hargrave out, Jalen Carter in. 2 different kinds of defensive tackles. What kind of impact do you think that'll have on the Eagles defense, especially in the run game?
The run game, I think we're going to be better. Javon Hargrave has never been known to be a stellar run, you know, guy. So, but again, Javon Hargrave is probably one of the best, you know, defensive tackles when it comes to quickness and gap shooting. Right, that's something that in pass rush, that's what he does. So I think overall in the run game, we're definitely going to benefit with Jalen Carter in there. And whenever you hear just look, you talking about the tape breakdown guru. If you say any comparison to Sue, Sue is probably the most dominant defensive tackle to ever come out of college. Like what he did in college, it was unbelievable. So when you hear those things, you know, just a small comparison, I think you take that, you know, with high regard and think that he's going to be a key cog in stopping the run.
Jeff, let me jump real quick. So off of what Jason was just saying, the stuff that I'd heard consistently from practice in college, he was a bully, Carter. Now, very physical, sometimes after the whistle, exactly the way Sue was at Nebraska. That's why we'd said this before the draft. The comparison was just as toughness, as we all are saying, physical play. And the other thing is in practice, he takes no plays off now. Whatever happened at his pro day workout is what happened. He wasn't in great shape. We've heard none of that in training camp practice. He's been dominant. No one's been able to handle him. And I'm with Jason. I cannot wait to see today what this looks like, because it's going to be pretty special.
How does, Adam, what you've heard about Jalen Carter, we've heard he's had a great camp and everybody here has just agreed that he can be a force, combined with what we know about Jordan Davis's development and conditioning in year 2. This is really the key to making the Eagles defense work from top to bottom. Those two, even especially Jordan Davis, as Greg mentioned, being out there and being able to hold up those offensive linemen and do his job.
Yeah, last year we all knew the conditioning was not good. The technique needed to improve, and we all knew this. This part was key. And Greg pointed this out last year. He got stood up way too much. From what I understand, that did not happen very much. In fact, he was getting to the linemen before they were getting into him, but he still needs to be more consistent. His conditioning is better. But the key here is, if he's still only playing like 25, 30% of the snaps, that's not good, because that's not why they made that trade up. He's got to play at least 50% of the snaps. And as the season goes along, even longer. And at some point, not that they drafted to be a pass rusher, you'd like to see him get in there a little bit and be disruptive against the quarterback.
Finishing up, Greg, are you surprised at all? I am. Are you surprised that the Eagles once again went into the season without a true 340-pound type backup nose tackle in case Jordan Davis either A, wasn't able to mature as fast as they want, or B, got hurt like last year when they signed Linval Joseph off the street?
Well, I'm wondering, Jeff, and again, I don't know their exact thought process in the front office, but my guess is that they think that if they had to do it, Carter could fill that role. Because he has the strength to do that. And then they still have, again, you guys mentioned, I wasn't out at training camp as much as you guys were, but that all then becomes dependent on how much 5-man front they play versus 4-man front.
Right.
Because, if you're going to play a 4-man front, you're probably going to play a lot of even fronts, which means you're not necessarily going to have someone lining up head up on the center. He's probably going to be more of a gap player, one of your tackles. So again, they may feel if they're changing their front a little bit and we see more 4-man fronts, that may not be as critical to have as a year ago when they played 5-man fronts and they had to go get Linval Joseph in the middle of the season.
Right.
So they could see Carter as a one technique, a gap player, because they still have Fletcher Cox. They still have Milton Williams, who no one kind of talks about, and from what I understand, had done well this preseason and has basically done well whenever he's played. Yeah. So, they may feel that they're okay if they're going to be playing more 4-man fronts.
And that makes a lot of sense. Also, as we reported a couple of years ago, and he did make the 53 this year, Marlon Tuipulotu is a guy at USC who played some nose tackle and has that kind of strength that they look for.
And he can play one technique as well. Yeah.
And there's a bunch of overweight defensive tackles that are at home right now. You pick up.
Yeah, the Eagles may have set the template last year for just trying to pluck somebody off the street and have them play at a pretty high level. All right, well, we know that the Eagles' interior defensive line will get tested today by the Patriots. They've got one of the game's rising stars at running back. Last year, Ramondre Stevenson, he surged onto the scene with over 1,000 rushing yards and nearly 1,500 yards from scrimmage. He had 6 touchdowns while playing 66% of the offensive snaps. He averaged 5 yards a carry and 5.2 yards per touch. So this is clearly a guy that Bill Belichick likes, the team is liked, and there are big expectations for him, even with the signing of Ezekiel Elliott. Greg, how would you describe Ramondre Stevenson as a runner?
The way I would describe him as a runner is this. I would say that he's tough, he's competitive, he's naturally powerful, he gets hard yards, he's a sustainer, but he has light feet. So he's not just a big, powerful guy. Now, he dropped a lot of weight since coming out from Oklahoma, because I watched him at Oklahoma and thought, wow, he does have really light feet, but he looked big and he's lost weight. I think that at times there's a slashing, darting element to his running when he gets to the second and third level. He did show, because I watched a ton of his tape from last year, he did show the ability to make people miss at the second and third levels. You wouldn't call him shifty in the way you'd think of a true scat back type shifty, but he's not just a big power runner. But one point I would make, last year, and again, we'll get into this conversation more about what personnel they're going to use, but last year, the large majority of his runs came out of 11 personnel, and he averaged 5.6 yards per rush out of 11 personnel. And the runs that he had out of 12, he only averaged 3.8. So again, whatever that means, I don't have a brilliant answer for what that means, other than the stat is a major glaring difference.
Sure. And that's a good point to make, knowing Bill O'Brien's history of using 12 personnel. Not saying he's definitely going to do that, but that's an interesting point. Stevenson, you're right. His feet always stuck out to me, Greg. For a big guy, I always thought he had nice, nimble feet. Last year, he had 9 carries that went for at least 15 yards. That's the same number as Christian McCaffrey, Miles Sanders, and Josh Jacobs. In fact, only 6 running backs in the NFL had more carries for 15 or more yards than Ramondre Stevenson. And he was one of just 4 NFL running backs last year with more than 200 carries to average 5 yards per carry and accrue more than 1,400 total yards.
And I bet, Jeff, that he probably had, of the backs who, talking about those longer runs, he may have had the fewest overall carries of any of those backs, because I think he only had about 210 carries. It wasn't as if he carried 280 times.
Right. So really interesting. Obviously a key piece of their offense. Jason, you also look there and you see that guy that Eagles fans do not ever want to see on the field. And that's their I guess their backup, or their other running back, Ezekiel Elliott, the former Cowboy.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think when you see Ezekiel Elliott in a Patriots uniform? It's like you couldn't hate him enough as a Cowboy if you're an Eagles fan. Now he's on the Patriots.
Guys change as they get older, and I don't want the Eagles fan to look at it and be like, "Oh, that's Ezekiel Elliott." That's a person, like, he's not the same person. he's an imitation there. When you get older, you're not the same person that you were when you're, young and spry. So I don't think the Eagles fans should be worried too much. Now, I will say this, is that the history of Bill O'Brien usually deals with a pass catching running back. So Ty Montgomery, that third running back, is a ex-receiver, and you got to think of all the great pass-catching running backs that the Patriots have used and deployed. So now when you consider a guy like Ty Montgomery, now he hadn't had as many reps as these guys, but when you consider him and you consider Mike Gesicki and, Hunter Henry, now you're starting to get into those glory Patriot years with, with Gronk and Hernandez, and, so 12 personnel and those odd matchups, I would be worried more about Ty Montgomery than I would be Ezekiel Elliott.
All right. That's an interesting point. That's certainly something Eagles fans probably would like to hear, because, they're tired of watching Ezekiel Elliott run for touchdowns on him. Adam, I will say, though, in this offense, for his role, now that he's not being force-fed as the number one guy with the Cowboys, I still think that when you watch Ezekiel last year, there was enough gas in the tank to be an effective, I don't know what you want to call it, change-up back or secondary back for this offense.
Yeah, look, he's not the same player. He's more of a sustainable guy. If you want 15 carries, he'll get you 50. He's not going to break off anything long anymore. But the thing that he did last year to protect Tony Pollard is when they needed someone to close the game with the Cowboys, it may not show it in the yards per carry, but he did a good job of that. This is a good role for him, whether it's pass protection. But I could tell you from talking to someone of the Patriots, they definitely see Stevenson as a three-down back. They are so happy with his progress. Greg talked about the weight loss. That was big for them last year. He came in really good shape in 2022, and that's why he had the breakout season. And by the way, Montgomery was added off the practice squad, so he will be the third back today. But as Jason talked about, look for him to be used out of the backfield. And also 81, Demario Douglas, who's a 6th round out of Liberty. He's a smaller guy, but he could really run. He could do a little bit of damage today. He'll have to dress because they just don't have enough receivers.
All right. Well, we are going to talk about how the Eagles are also not just going to match up against this Patriots running game, but what they're going to do against the Patriots passing game in a second. First, we're going to pause to hear from our great friends at Sky Motor Cars, including the voice of the Eagles, Mr. Merrill Reese.
Cars in Westchester is a different sort of dealership. All it takes is one look at their Highline pre-owned vehicles that people all over the country want and need. Owner Brett Schiller, make sure you don't spend a dime of your money before you purchase the car. Sky Motor Cars allows you to make all the decisions regarding your next vehicle. At Sky Motor Cars, you never have to spend more than necessary. Visit SkyMotorCars.com today or call 610-918-7225.
All right. If you have a chance to go visit our friends in Westchester, PA at Sky Motor Cars, please go do that. Or you can just see them at SkyMotorCars.com. But if you go in, make sure you tell them Adam and Jeff sent you. You will get a great deal. All right. Speaking of a deal, the Eagles defense, we're talking about the back end, gone. Our guys who signed some pretty good deals in the offseason, just not with the Eagles. Gone are the two starting linebackers, TJ Edwards and Kaiser White. Also gone are the two starting safeties from last year, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, CJ, as he likes to be called, and Marcus Epps. So that forced the Eagles to refurbish or retool or replenish, however you want to talk about
it. You know what's
it.
pretty amazing, Jeff? Watching the game Thursday night, I
Uh-huh.
couldn't believe it. Gardner Johnson was talking a lot. He never does
believe
that,
that?
does
I know. He was after the game too. I mean, this guy has a lot to say.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. He was talking a lot during the game.
Well, Greg, some
They
might say he
gave
talked
him the
himself out of a lot of
game.
money. But so let's talk about who's in now at the linebacker level. It's Nakobe Dean, ready to emerge in year 2. Zach Cunningham, a guy they signed off the street in training camp. At safety, we know there's Terrell Edmonds, Reed Blankenship here coming into year 2, Sidney Brown, the draft pick in the 3rd round, and Justin Evans, a guy who came over in free agency from the Saints. So that's a lot of different names that are coming in. So Jason, when you look at this defense, you said you expect the Eagles to be good. You like them to be good because they have still a very good front 4 rush. Do you have any sort of concerns though about the middle of this defense and all the newness and who's in and who's out and the sub packages and all of that?
Well, you definitely do. When you get a veteran coach and offensive coordinator like the Patriots have, and you have a lot of young players, they tend to exploit the kind of weaknesses that the Eagles would have. Misdirections, sending guys across their face, making it hard for them. So I believe that this game is going to be one of the tougher games the Eagles will have all season. Everyone is just thinking that the Eagles are going to go and hand this team, their lunch. This team has a lot of talented players on it, and they have a veteran coaching staff. So I think this game is going to be extremely hard for the Eagles when it comes to the way that this team plays. So yes, I'm definitely concerned about Nakobe Dean, Zach Cunningham. Now they beat out some veteran guys, and Miles Jack retired because I don't think that he saw a path to play, right? So these guys have done a great job. So I'm definitely concerned. Definitely.
Sure.
I can't say any other.
Sure. And that echoes
safety. Who's going to start at safety next to Blankenship?
Well, that's a great question. And that might be something that changes from week to week. And, I would ask you, Greg, let's not assume anything, but we know what the Patriots have both in pass catching weapons up front. We know what their identity has been. What would you expect from the safety? Would you expect someone like Terrell Edmonds because of his experience to start with? We know Reed Blankenship's a starter.
Right. Well, what I'm about to say, nothing's 100%, as Jay knows, in the NFL. So I don't want people to think, hey, what I'm saying is going to happen on every single play. Okay.
Right.
But Edmonds is really kind of a hybrid linebacker safety. He's not really a deep safety. So if he starts, like I said, it doesn't mean there would never, ever be a snap of single high in which he was single high, but that's not what he is. Like he couldn't, you wouldn't want him playing there, 15 snaps. Now, again, you could also argue who they're playing against today. They don't really have a true deep threat. So maybe it's not as big a factor as you might think against other teams. But Edmonds, for the most part, is almost kind of a hybrid linebacker safety. The guy I am most fascinated by, because I remember doing him coming out of Texas A&M, is Justin Evans. And I don't know why it hasn't worked out for him in the league, because I thought coming out of A&M, and I believe, Adam, wasn't he a second-round pick when he came out?
2017, but he missed 3 straight seasons due to injury.
And that's the problem. And again, now you're dealing with a guy that just hasn't been available. But he had the traits of and again, I'm not going to sit here and say if he didn't get injured, he'd be an all-pro, great player, but he had the traits of a multi-dimensional safety that could play both on the back end and closer to the line of scrimmage. So I'm curious to see how it plays out because, Sidney Brown's a rookie. Everybody's excited about him because his attitude, his swagger, and he's straight line fast, but he's still a rookie. Whereas Evans has been in the league. Last year with New Orleans, he played in their dime. He wasn't a starter, but he played in their dime. So he did play meaningful snaps. But he's got the traits to be able to play both in the box and on the back end.
Yeah, so that sort of provokes 2 questions for me, Greg, and everyone else. One, I think it stands out that the Eagles are going into this game with only 3 off-ball linebackers, right? They didn't elevate one from the practice squad, so they really only have Nakobe Dean, Zach Cunningham, and Christian Ellis. And, 2 of those guys are not very experienced. So
that leads me to believe you could see a lot more dime from Desai than you did with Jonathan Gannon. Now, I could be totally wrong, but I mean, maybe that's the way they see it.
Right. But also to your point, guys, and with Terrell Edmonds being mostly a box safety, I don't know if that gives them a whole lot of 1 high, 2 high versatility and post-snap versatility. So I wonder if Terrell Edmonds is more of a base nickel safety for them, but Justin Evans becomes a sub package safety where they can maybe roll the safeties up a little bit more, give you different looks in some passing downs.
Yeah, and by the way, if they do play dime, Edmonds could be the dime linebacker.
Yeah,
That's the thing, is he
Right.
fills that role too, because he's done that before. So, these are all unanswerables right now because we don't know what Sean Desai has in mind. And from the preseason, you have no idea. So, we'll see how it plays out. But I'm really curious. A couple of things I'm really curious about. Nakobe Dean, the assumption is, and we all hope it works out, the assumption is, played at Georgia, great player. He's just going to step right in and he's an all-pro right now. We don't know that. I mean, he has hardly played any meaningful snaps in the NFL. He's an unknown. We hope he's great, but he's a total unknown. And, and at safety, we have to wait and see.
Adam?
I was just going to add that they did play some big nickel in training camp, practice a bit.
Yes, they could do, yes.
Yep. So between Edmonds, Evans, and Blankenship, Geoff, that's possible. And Greg, one thing I want to ask you from your tape study with Adrian Phillips, who's sort of been this different quasi linebacker, whatever the case may be, how much of a factor is Phillips on the other side at safety?
He's a huge factor because they play big nickel as well. Phillips also matches up to tight ends. When they played the Ravens last year, the Patriots did, and I looked at that tape specifically because I wanted to see how they'd match Andrews because I thought, hey, that's an equivalent to Goddard. They played a lot of Phillips on him. They also played a guy, he only played 3 games last year, named Joshua Bledsoe, who came out of Missouri, a big safety. He's still on the roster, I believe. So Phillips is a really important player in what the Patriots do because he plays in the box. He can cover tight ends. Every once in a while, he'll play in the back end, but he's not really a back end safety. But he's become kind of that guy for the Patriots that plays, that same with in many ways, Jabril Peppers, kind of a similar player.
Yeah, so I think this conversation has helped answer 2 questions that we've had in the chat box already. One from Paul Mancini, and the other, which basically is the same question, which is, how do the Eagles plan to match up against the Patriots' 12 personnel in the passing game with both Mike Gesicki and Hunter Henry? And the answer is we have to see that. We don't know. We just discussed there's a variety of different looks that they can use. I do think that if we're to draw anything, though, from the preseason, as Adam mentioned, we saw Justin Evans, Jason, there get some meaningful reps, and he is more athletic when healthy than someone like a Terrell Edmonds. So do you see the advantage there of going with a kind of a more of a coverage safety look in your sub packages and getting Justin Evans on the field, or maybe even a Sidney Brown in certain packages?
Well, it all depends on how much the Patriots are committed to running the football, right? Because Terrell Edmonds is a guy that's built to be a downhill safety and be able to stop the run better than Evans. So it all depends. But if you get into a situation where they're trying to create mismatch in the passing game with their tight ends, yes, I would think that you would have Evans to be the guy that's covering more and or going into a more of a big nickel and or playing a sub package to their 12 and not base.
Sure.
I think the big nickel, and Adam mentioned and Jay just reiterated, and I think that's an important point because the first thing teams do, I talked to a lot of coaches this offseason, just in general. I probably talked to more coaches this offseason than I ever have. And the first thing offensively you're trying to find out is how a team matches up personnel-wise. Then you get into the next phase, which is formation. Then you just keep going down the list, but it starts with personnel. So if they're going to play a good amount of 12 personnel, which we would anticipate, then how do the Eagles match up personnel-wise? And I think big nickel makes sense because both Gesicki and Henry can detach from the formation. So in other words, they're not just tight ends that are going to line up attached to tackles or in a wing tight end or a slight flex. Those guys, they could run empty out of 12 personnel. No problem at all. And Bill O'Brien is a big empty guy, by the way. So So, I think the first thing we're going to find out, and I'm sure Bill O'Brien wants to find that out early, and Jay, this, it's hunting and picking and seeing how the defense responds, is they're going to find out what the Eagles personnel package is when they line up with 12.
Yeah, and Adam, we talked about, just the idea of the Patriots probably coming out with something that looks like a run formation to keep Zach Cunningham on the field, but then trying to pass out of it, because as we saw in camp, the guy is, when healthy, he can tackle. He's got great length. He is what he's been for other teams, Houston and Tennessee, but in pass coverage, that has never been his forte.
Yeah, in fact, someone we spoke with from another team brought this up, that when you see Zach Cunningham on the field and base throw the football, I get it. Like some teams are analytically driven will do that anyway. Mm-hmm. But the one issue that the former teams that he was on would say is that it was an issue with him in coverage. Now, I will say this also. When is the last time you saw a tall linebacker like this on the Eagles? Like, I know Christian Ellis is tall, but this guy's pretty long, Jeff.
He's a legit 6'3".
Yeah, Greg, wasn't he one of the better 34 inside linebackers you saw when he was healthy years ago?
If I'm not mistaken, I know Jay wants to jump in here. He's waiting to jump in. But I think Cunningham might have led the league in tackles, or he's a top 3 guy for a couple of years when he was with Houston, and he was a really good player.
Jay?
No, me. This was a deviation from before, but
my bad.
That first 15, because to get off Greg's point, is the most important part of football, because that's when every team has their intel. Because you're running stuff you normally don't run in first 15. Like, you're just trying to see what they're going to do.
Oh, wow.
Great point.
In this situation, like, we're in 21, we're in this. Like, you see the most personnel switches in the first 15 just so people can get their information in. So I just wanted to say that.
No, that's a really good
point. From a player's perspective, it drives you nuts because you're thinking, you never run this crap.
Right. It's funny you say that. That's a great
so
point.
You're saying they're doing it just to get some sort of a tell?
Yeah, you're doing it to build like your intel on what plays you're going to go with going forward, right? So it's stuff that we don't normally do in this. Jason, we're going to put you in the backfield in this. We just want to see. I was like, dude, just run our offense.
That's really good.
No, Jay's right. Mike Holmgren was well known, and he's not the only one, for having 15 different formations on the first 15 plays, just to see how the defense would react. And then in the third quarter, you come back to something. Now you know how they're going to react, and then you can, Kyle Shanahan's a master at that. Most NFL, offensive coaches, that's in their mindset,
right.
That's the way NFL football is played.
Sure.
Let me throw something back at Jason on this as a former receiver. When going into a game that the Eagles have a lot of change, linebacker's one thing, but at safety, when you've got 2 new starters, and we know about Blankenship because you have the tape from last season, is that something in your mind you think you could win, or you go to your play call and say, hey, we need to go after this?
It all depends on who the guy is. Remember, there is very rare can you go into a game without tape on it. Like, there's going to be tape somewhere of that guy. So if you can figure out if you have an advantage, and it depends on your coordinator. There are some coordinators that like to go with their scheme, and they'll get to matchups within their scheme. And then there's other coordinators, when they see a mismatch, will scrap the entire freaking game plan and go after their player. It all depends on the type of coordinator you have. Coach Reed is a coordinator that likes to get within his matchups within the flow of the game. A guy like Todd Haley is a guy that would say, hey, frick it, number 36 is out there. I'm throwing to him until they stop it. Those are just different guys.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Wow. That's interesting.
Hey, Adam, I want to bring attention to something that's very important. Last year, the Eagles were one of the best takeaway teams in the NFL and best turnover ratio. They were 4th in total takeaways, and they were 3rd in turnover ratio, right? But if you look at the current group that they've got, especially on the back end at safety, we're not talking about guys like C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who have a reputation for being a ball hawk. In fact, in their career, you've got Terrell Edmonds, who has 5 interceptions in his entire career. Reed Blankenship, we saw him last year pick off Aaron Rodgers. He doesn't have a whole lot of experience, but that's 1 interception. Justin Evans has 4 in his 25 career starts. And of course, Sidney Brown is a rookie, so he doesn't have any. So if you combine that, that's 10 interceptions in 104 starts, which is only a few more interceptions than CJ Gardner-Johnson had last year. And he had 5 in a 4-game span. So when you look at the Eagles defense, and again, we have a lot to learn, but just the idea about how important turnover production and creation was for them last year and what they have now, which is right now a clean slate. Nobody is known for being able to flip the field like that. Does that concern you in tight games or coming out in a week 1 here that they don't really have a bona fide guy like CJ Gardner in the back end?
All right, a couple of things there, and coaches will tell you this. As long as you have the pressure up front, you're still going to be able to create turnovers. But on your point about not having CJ Gardner-Johnson, and think about it, had he not gotten hurt, he clearly would have led the NFL in interceptions. They may not have that guy, but one thing that did surprise me, and I know it's only training camp practice, so you can't go overly crazy about it, but Blankenship had a lot of big plays in training camp, in practice. The knock on him from a scouting perspective was, from the tape from MTSU, who was a 5-year starter, one step behind sometimes. He knew what he wanted to do, but couldn't get there. That's from an actual NFL scouting report. Smart guy. You saw that pick, incredible pick he had against Aaron Rodgers. But this is the thing, Geoff. He's not a fluid athlete. He ran in the mid 4.5s. Maybe that's part of why he wasn't drafted. He clearly should have been drafted. He's good enough to be like a 5th or 6th round pick. But maybe it's lack of foot quickness. So you do worry about that. Who's really the playmaker of that backfield? Maybe someday it'll be Sidney Brown, but he's not that guy right now. So it's a great question. The turnovers theoretically should be down, but I'm not going to write off the fact that, okay, well, they lost all these players. They have a new play caller, that they can't be a good turnover team. When you have that type of pass rush, guys, we all know this. Everybody watching knows this. You're going to get some turnovers. You're going to get, because you're going to pressure the quarterback. But not having that playmaker you're talking about, Geoff, that's a factor.
Now, Jason, that goes to your point. You mentioned the rush should still be there, so opportunities will be there. But I know you liked Reed Blankenship last year. You like what you saw, but again, CJ Gardner-Johnson is a guy who just had a knack, right, for being able to take the ball away.
I'm not completely sold on that. The reason, here's my thing. I'm not completely sold on that. Gardner-Johnson is a guy that is around the football, and I give him that credit, and is good at his role. Very good at nickel / safety. He got better as the season went on. Not the best at tackling at times, all those things. But when you look at his interceptions, I want to say 3 of them were tip passes. And that was plays that were made by Darius Slay, James Bradbury, tip balls at the line of scrimmage. When you get that pass rush, guys that are tipping passes, you have corners that are going to stay in phase with guys. There's opportunities for safeties. And I don't think that we have a guy that's going to, Ed Reed type of guy. No, you can't find those guys. I think the guy with the best ball skills he's a rookie, and it's going to take him time to develop. But I still think there's turnovers to be had because of all the players you have around these guys.
2 points, Jeff, if I could. Number one,
the
Eagles led the league in 3rd down sacks by a wide margin a year ago. So to me, that's really important. They rushed the quarterback really well on 3rd down. And the other point about Sidney Brown, we know he's a straight line fast athlete. You guys were at training camp more than I was, so I don't know how he was deployed during training camp, but almost exclusively at Illinois, he was a box player. Now, he did cover tight ends, and he did that better than, to be honest with you, I thought he would. I thought he covered tight ends well in college football. In fact, he had some great snaps against Sam Laporta of Iowa, who's the number 1 starting tight end for the Lions, who played almost 60 snaps on Thursday night. So he covered tight ends really well. But other than that, he played in the box. He was not a back-end safety, hardly at all, at Illinois. Now, I know he's got speed, and that automatically, the assumption is that, well, that means he can play on the back end. Maybe he can, but that's something he has to learn. He's not going to automatically be able to do that just from day one and be a great back end safety.
Yeah, just because you have straight line speed doesn't mean that you're going to be able to run to this side of the field and the other side. It's equivalent to a receiver. There's a bunch of fast guys that play, but how many people can do what Tyreek Hill does? It's because they're able to do more because of his athleticism. He can get to more spots. Same way with safety. Just because a guy can run fast doesn't mean that he's a post safety.
Gotcha. All right. Speaking of doing more, as we close out the first segment here, talking about the Eagles defense, they will be up against quarterback Mac Jones today. The Eagles have some inside knowledge on Mac Jones. Obviously, Matt Patricia was the play caller for the Patriots last year. As I mentioned, he's with the Eagles defense this year. Greg, I would like your assessment of Mac Jones last year, but also where you think maybe his development can improve with Bill O'Brien back there as their play caller.
I think you have to start with what Mac Jones is. Okay. There's not a lot of mystery to Mac Jones. What Mac Jones, what his profile is to be successful is he's a pocket quarterback, so he must be secure and protected in the pocket. Now, I know you could say that with most quarterbacks, but he's not a second reaction playmaker. So he needs to be secure in the pocket. He needs a well-schemed passing game, Jeff, that really defines the reads and the throws for him so he can play within timing and rhythm. Now he does have the ability to make late in the down throws from the pocket, because one thing about him, and it's one reason people liked him coming out of Alabama, is he doesn't have to stride to throw the ball. He's not a power armed guy, but he doesn't have to stride to throw the ball. So he can work in muddied pockets if need be, but he didn't do a very good job of that a year ago. A year ago, you got the sense he was just an uncomfortable player. I'm sure he wasn't comfortable with the whole offense. And he didn't look very good. And the other thing about him is he must be consistently precise with his ball placement. That's the kind of quarterback that he has to be. So there's no mystery about him. So he needs to be protected, and he needs the system more so than a lot of other quarterbacks to really present the reads and the throws for him so that he can play within the structure of it. That's what he is.
Sure. Fellas, Adam, Jason, do you think this could get a little ugly today for Mac Jones if the Patriots can't get a good running game or can't move the chains well?
Ugly.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they're going to protect him. I think there's multiple ways to protect your quarterback, and I believe that has to do with the running back and also the tight ends. Like there's a lot of, like I said, young players. I think Mac Jones is, I won't say that he's going to have a stellar game or anything like that, but I think that there's definitely outlets within our defense, right, to get the ball out quick. And so can it get ugly? I hope it does. I really I hope Jalen Carter is getting home. That's all
I think you're right, though.
I'm watching the game today for Jalen Carter. That's why I'm watching the game.
I think you're right, Adam. I think Jason's right about they will do their best to protect him. They're not just going to let it throw him out there with just a bunch of 10 personnel or spread and empty and let him just, sit there.
Yeah, Geoff, as you were talking about earlier in the hour, look, Belichick, and I know he does this a lot. He doesn't want to talk about his own team. He likes to talk about the other team. He talked about how they have the best pass rush in football, and they still should, obviously top three. The personnel is still very, very good. But the thing about Mac Jones I want to get back to, so what happened last year, and Greg talked about in passing, and he wasn't comfortable. So what happened was, I'm told, with Patricia, he actually changed some of Josh McDaniel's offense, adjusted some of the terminology, and the players and Mac Jones, they were not comfortable with the change, whatever those changes entailed. They weren't comfortable with it. They sort of rebelled. There was a story about how Mac Jones sought advice from other people outside the organization that irked Belichick. It was just ugly. And now you've got Bill O'Brien. You could say what you want. He's actually a pretty good play caller. I've talked to coaches who've worked with him. He balances 11 and 12 based on the personnel they have that week. He's a good play caller. So this is going to be good. Guy's a good coach, and things are going to be better for him. But as we were all talking about today, now he's going up against the Eagles, and protection is going to be super key. That's the thing, is how do they keep two tight ends?
Right. What's
the protection going to look like, Geoff? That to me is, and Jason was talking about it. To me, that's the key to this game, because if they don't protect him, this thing's going to be ugly early.
I'm wondering how the personality.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry about that.
No, go ahead.
I'm worried about the personality fits between the two, because Mac Jones, unlike most Patriots quarterback, have said some things in the media in the past, and Bill O'Brien's an explosive personality. So I don't necessarily know how those two personalities are going to, meld together, so that's one.
I was just going to say, there's multiple, as Jay indicated, there's multiple ways to go about protecting him. And, we might think that going in empty, that's terrible, but don't forget, empty sort of makes the defense declare a little bit. And normally in empty, the ball comes out quicker. So, again, obviously if the Eagles front is just dominating, that's different. And it may on given snaps, we expect that. But I think you will see them spread things out, particularly at a 12 personnel, because they'll see what the Eagles defense looks like at a 12 personnel wise. And then they'll see, because Jones at his core is he's a timing player. The ball has to come out.
Right.
And he did have success as a rookie. He obviously was very good at Alabama his last year. Bill O'Brien, as Adam said, has been around the league a long time. He's a good offensive coach. He puts together a good plan, and he's a good play caller. So we'll see. I mean, as Jay said, hey, it'd be great if, all that didn't work. But, Bill O'Brien is a veteran at this. This is not brand new to him.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. We have got the Eagles offense to take a look at here coming up. And also, I've got a great trivia question for you guys and our audience.
Oh, boy.
First, I want to tell everybody, look, we've been talking about it all summer. Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City. They're the exclusive Jersey Shore resort of Inside the Birds. They turned 5 years old this summer. Summer's still going on. It's not fall yet. So they're still partying. They can't wait to party with you. Join Ocean for exciting promotions and sweepstakes, headline entertainment, the best day life and nightlife lineup in AC. They've got the birthday bar. They have exclusive local collabs and partnerships, commemorative 5th birthday merchandise, and so much more. You can't miss stunning fireworks. I think they're still going on, and unique events. Ocean Rewards members will enjoy over $5 million in gifts and prizes. So make sure you sign up for an Ocean Rewards card to get in on the fun next time you visit. All right, hour 2 here of Inside the Birds pregame live, and man, it's just good to be back in the action and getting it going here. The Eagles are 3.5-point favorites today in New England, and the over/under is 44.5. I have a trivia question for you and for our audience, and it involves Jason Avant. Jason, your 10-year NFL career, the most targets you ever had in one game is 14. That's a pretty productive game.
We were losing.
You're starting to give the answer away. You know what team? You know what team that came against?
Oh,
Jason?
we know it.
Do I know it? I don't. It's probably the Patriots.
It was the Patriots, right? You did have 8 catches for 110 yards, a touchdown that day. It was a 30, as you mentioned. You guys got stomped on, 38-20 loss. The problem for you and your offense and your defense was the guy on the other side of the field for the Patriots that day. His name is, you might have known him from college. His name is Tom Brady, right?
I remember
361 yards.
That's when Kyle, what was the cornerback? Was it Kyle Arrington? He was here with the Eagles.
Yes, Kyle Arrington. Yeah.
Patriot.
Oh my gosh. I remember that play like it was yesterday. Like they were in only like Bill Belichick, right? They're in a cover 2 man. You know, the underneath guys follow the, the receivers. But they had it to the boundary where the corner would drop off and go back to cover 2. And I'm like, all week, I'm like, dude, Vince Young is not going to know this guy. It's dropping off. So I had a deep crossover there, and I'm running the play. I'm like, this dude is going to like kill me. So I catch the ball, and Kyle Arrington, boom, right in the ribs. I'm like, freaking Vince Young, man.
By the way, I would have to say, among the 400-yard passing games I've ever seen in my NFL career, that was one of the worst for Vince Young. He threw for 400 yards that day, but it wasn't the kind of 400-yard game that you're like, wow.
Yeah,
it was like, oh my God, stop. Just stop throwing. Everybody, stop playing football. It was bad. But as you know, Tom Brady is going to be honored today at Gillette Stadium. You may have heard that he played for the Patriots and won a lot of titles there. He went to Michigan. You went to Michigan. Did you ever come across Tom at that Wolverine alumni events or anything like that?
Yeah. Tom is a cool dude. And, he's very humble and knows about you. Like if you went to Michigan and you're after him, he knows about you, So he actually was one of the guys that wanted me to come to the Patriots. And but I didn't run fast enough, and Bill Belichick wasn't having it.
Okay. Well, it's not like the Patriots have had a bunch of burners throughout their career. They've had a few,
but they and that time they were into that, and so they viewed me as an outside receiver. So they were like, hey, he's an outside receiver and doesn't run fast enough. So
it wasn't meant to be. All right. Well, let's get into this Eagles offense now. Obviously, as I mentioned, they bring back pretty much almost everybody from last year, sans right guard Isaac Seumalo, who it's now Cam Jurgens' job at right guard, and then they refurbished their running back committee. But I want to really focus to start off on Jalen Hurts, because I would say, and I think you guys have seen this too, one of the toughest things to do in the NFL, unless you are a Tom Brady type, a top 3%er, right, is to have an amazing year and then do it again the very next year, and then again, especially if you're a quarterback. You can't deny, though, what Jalen Hurts did last year. 3,701 passing yards, 66.5% completion percentage, 3rd in the league in yards per attempt at 8 yards. His passer rating of 101.5, that was 3rd best in the NFL. He had an MVP-type season, top 5, top 10 in almost all major passing categories. And then, by the way, he ran for 760 yards and 13 touchdowns as well. He was in many ways the ultimate weapon. Adam, I want to start with you, because we know he signed this huge contract in the offseason, which made him the highest paid player in the league for about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And then Lamar signed, and then somebody signed, and then Herbert signed, and then Burrow signed. And now Jalen Hurts is like, yeah, he's still really well paid, but not number one in the league. How did you see him, though, this training camp? What were you looking for in training camp as a guy who's now the guy with the contract? And what did you observe?
Yeah, I'll tell you what was noticeable. And I remember distinctly when he was a rookie, and also in 21, it wasn't good. But now it's almost elite. His field awareness, understanding, well, he knows what the play is, but understanding the timing of within each play, it was so noticeable when we were at training camp. I was at 8 or 10 practices this summer. I'm not saying it's Mahomes level, but it's not too far off in terms of guys know where they have to be. We know his timing with A.J. Brown's great, but with Goddard, with Devontae Smith, whoever's out there. And then the other thing, and these were not checkdowns, we saw a ton of design passes. You saw with DeAndre Swift, because Swift and Swift in particular didn't get a ton of reps because they wanted to get him ready, preserve him for the regular season. But you saw, Jeff, you and I saw that. I know you saw it too. When we were in training camp, there were a ton of design passes to these running backs. When did we really see that in the past?
No, I mean, that's a wrinkle in this offense that we'll talk about when we get to the running game that I think can be make the Eagles more prolific in some ways than they were last year. The other thing I noticed, and I think it's a continuation, is that he was just lockstep with Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, and A.J. Brown. I mean, it sort of like hit the ground running like they did last year. So that goes to my point, Jason, about, we've seen the elites of the game. There are not many. The elites like Tom Brady or Christian McCaffrey or Tyreek Hill or Aaron Donald, the guys who dominate every single time they step on the field from year to year to year without much variance. Where is Jalen Hurts in that conversation for you? Do you still have to see more? Are you convinced he is that guy right now?
Well, I'll answer that question in the second part of this.
Okay.
I want you to understand, I believe that this is the most important year for Jalen Hurts in all of his career going forward, because this is the year where you get your $53 million, right? A year. You get Jordan Brand as their key number one guy for the NFL. You're on Essence Magazine. You're picking up endorsements left and right. You're, Fresh Prince of Philly, the new one, right? So all of these external things that Jalen Hurts hadn't had to worry about, because he's always been the underdog. He's just been in the basement grinding and dealing with it. Now there's a different temptation. There's a new enemy, and that's your own success. And learning how to deal with that going forward is like the hardest thing to do. Now you're talking about the amenities of the NFL. Now you're being invited to the Mark Rubin all-white party, and you're able to go to the Met Gala, and you're an A-lister now when it comes to Hollywood. All of that, and you have 2 Chainz and Drake in your phone, right? All of those things, it's a big deal, and it's hard to deal with. And we've seen guys like OBJ and all these other ones, their career goes down when they get this access. So to see Jalen Hurts respond to all of this is going to be very, very important. I think it's one of the most exciting stories of the offseason. Now, if anybody can overcome it, it's Jalen Hurts, because he's been down so long, and people talking about him not having the skills and the type of mentality that he has when it comes to work. He tries to separate it. But I'm curious to see, will he be able to sustain this? Can he? Yes, I've seen him do it. Is he a top 5 quarterback in this league? I don't think that you can actually make a case that he, that he isn't in. He's always going to be in that top 5 conversation. So I'm excited to see it.
Greg,
I thought we all had Drake and 2 Chainz in our phone, by the way.
I actually just had
Really?
he called me 5 minutes ago.
I know
just had to,
Caplan does. Yeah.
Greg's so old, he's got 5 Chainz calling him up.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
5 Chainz.
Yeah.
Greg, what is the development in Jalen Hurts you saw last year that most stuck out to you?
I would say ball location on intermediate and deeper throws. I think that was always a concern with Jalen Hurts. See, it's funny. All I can do is watch tape and then talk to coaches and see if what I see, if they talk to me about it, and then it resonates because I know exactly what they're talking about because I see it on tape. you have to understand the Eagles offense. I know Jay does. The Eagles offense, because of Hurts is in the gun almost every snap. Okay, now let's leave out third and long for the moment. We can get to that, where, by the way, he was very good. But let's stay in normal down and distance. When you're in normal down and distance and Hurts is in the gun with an offset back, the defense is very predictable for the most part because of the run game element with Hurts. Okay, and that's the league is sort of moving in that direction with some quarterbacks. So what happens is, from a pass game perspective, you don't have to be that multiple. I had a great conversation with a coach who was on the Eagles staff who basically laid it all out for me. The Eagles pass game is not that multiple and detailed in normal down and distance because they know what they're going to get. They know how defenses have to line up, because now you've got to get a safety, even the post safety, involved in being a run defender because of the Hurts factor in the run game. So the Eagles run a core group of pass game concepts that they execute at a high level that Jalen really understands extremely well. And he knows all the, I don't want to say the checks, because that all the adjustments is the better word, all the adjustments based on coverage. I'll give you a very simple example. Okay, and we saw this a ton last year, and Jay will appreciate this. Let's say you call 4 verts. 4 verts is normally put in your game plan if you're expecting a lot of cover 3, because it's normally a cover 3 beater. But let's say you call 4 verts and you get split safety. We saw this a ton last year. Very often the adjustment, the automatic adjustment, is those inside receivers are just going to turn into benders, particularly the boundary receiver. It's just going to be a bender because you don't want to run your inside seams right at safeties. How many times last year did we see him hit Goddard on that little bender inside? Jay knows exactly what I'm talking about. So you have little adjustments that are built in. Jalen understands those extremely well. And so this offense is very, very efficient because of what they know they're going to get from the defense. Now, I don't want to talk too long. We can come back to this, but I'll get to third down as well, where I thought he was very good last year. And that's another area where I thought he improved dramatically.
Well, while we stick on the subject, though, Jay, did you want to add to that?
No, just and what he's talking about with that bender to the boundaries is important, because when you get that split safety middle, your linebacker or the guy that's running the middle is always taught to go to the field and or to speed. So Goddard is going to be to the boundary by design, because that guy's going to go away from him. You know, so like just little things like that, and him being able to pick those things up from, year 3 to 4, 2 to 3 is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, if you to go off what you're saying, the development of the intermediary and deep ball were great, and I think that's, Adam, sort of also a function off of what they knew about his. Remember how we talked about how I think, Jason, you're the first one to bring this to light on the Q&A pod, that the teammate had a scan of his brain, and that it compared very favorably to some of the smartest and best quarterbacks in the NFL. Now, it's a reach to say, oh, well, that's going to mean he's going to be all right. It's a scan of a brain, but they obviously saw something there, Adam, in his ability to learn and eventually, mature and process. We know his processing wasn't great because he was in so many different offenses and asked to do different things, but his processing has really stood out over the last year and a half.
Really much better. In fact, I want to build something off what you were talking about, what Jason gave us a couple of years ago in the Q&A show about their scan of his brain and the capacity to learn and all that. So one of the teams on my training camp tour this summer mentioned to me his recall, because before they could even turn the tape on, they said, hey, here are the 10 games we're going to watch with you. He goes, oh, here's what happened against Kansas. He went through everything, and this is 4 or 5 years ago that he faced these teams. He went through it all before they turned the tape on. They were like, how do you remember all this? His recall. So this goes to what the Eagles found out. His recall is incredible. And this is the big thing, though, Geoff. You and I saw when he was drafted in 2020, processing wasn't real good, a little better in 21. Last year, he made such a bigger jump because in the same offense with the same coaches, very calm in the pocket, not looking to bail, letting the play go through. It's just the meld of great coaching and a kid who wants to be coached. How important is it, guy? And Jason could attest to this. When your quarterback actually wants to be coached hard, I think he's got a chance to be really good.
Really good. And that's what made Tom Brady great. Is Tom Brady allowed himself to be criticized and ridiculed the same way as everyone else. And he wanted that. And he went to the coaches and told them, hey, listen, if you're going to curse out the running backs for making mistakes, you got to curse me out too, right? When you're a guy that's not above that, you earn the respect of your teammates and also the respect of your coaches. And it's the difference between Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is not a guy that had a problem processing. He was a guy with a problem with the type of reps. It was a rep thing with Jalen Hurts. It wasn't a processing thing, because when you have that bat suit, when I call that with athletic quarterbacks, you turn to it. It's the utility belt. And until an offensive coordinator sits you down and makes you go through your progressions and you get the reps at it, the guys that are not athletic have years of those reps. Now, when a guy makes you sit down and say, hey, listen, I don't want you playing football like this. I want you to learn the game this way. And now you just need the repetition that. And Jalen Hurts is proven that he is a guy that's willing to learn in every aspect.
So I do, Greg, based on what Jason said, I want to get to your Jalen Hurts third down observations soon, but I want to stick on what he just said about the bat suit, the ability to run and make second reaction plays, be athletic, and sort of apply that to today, because we know that the Patriots face Josh Allen twice a year. And I believe they played Lamar Jackson last year.
They played Lamar and Justin Fields last year, and I went through
right, and Justin Fields. So, from someone who watches as much tape as you do, what would you expect how would you expect the Patriots to try to defend against Jalen Hurts, the passer and runner?
Well, that's all situational football, but let's say you get to longer yardage situations. I think they'll use combination of a spy, which they did last year in those situations, and coverages that are more zone-based where there are lurk defenders. There'll be a middle lurk defender, closer to the ball. Now, you can argue and say, well, that doesn't matter, but you still have to try to defend him. I mean, and they'll also do what they did last year as well, where they did what a lot of people like to call mush rush, where you don't have anybody on the outside go beyond the quarterback and give him a lane. And I think they'll also try to push him to his left, because he wants to escape to his right every single time, either to his right or up the middle. He does not want to go to his left. Now, that means he can't or has never made a throw going to his left. I can remember he hit Smith last year running to his left. I can't remember the opponent, but I can see the play in my mind. But I mean, you're dealing with tendency and probability. Right. You don't want him moving to his right, and you don't want him escaping up the middle. So you try to structure your defense to prevent that. Now, we know that sometimes spies work, sometimes they don't work. But you still, like I said, you still have to line up and play. So you try to put together the best plan that can minimize what he can do well.
Sure.
Last year, the Patriots played a ton more zone than they had in previous years. Now, that wasn't all a function of the fact that they played Justin Fields and Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen, who they've been playing for a number of years. But last year, and it might have been a function that Belichick didn't feel great about his corners because they didn't have Gilmore anymore, but they played more cover three. They're predominantly a single high safety defense, but last year they played more cover three. We don't know how they feel about Christian Gonzalez and his ability to match up. He's a rookie going up against two really, really good receivers. And when we jump around to this, I want to get Jay's view, because I watched a ton of Devonta Smith, and I got such an appreciation for Devonta Smith. I think he is so good. But anyway, we can get to that in a sec. But yeah, they still have to. They're going to line up, and they're going to try to do things in their mind that will minimize Hurts' ability to make special second reaction plays.
All right. Well, we'll see. Obviously they have the experience, like you mentioned. They went against Lamar last year, Justin Fields, and they faced Josh Allen twice a year. So this will not be their first rodeo with that. Real quick, the biggest thing offensively that's different about the Eagles from a skill position standpoint is obviously the running backs. We mentioned that Miles Sanders no longer with the team. He signed with the Panthers in free agency. They did bring in Rashad Penny, and then they went and traded for DeAndre Swift. They already had Kenny Gainwell and Boston Scott. Again, some people say rich get richer, especially when they were able to get DeAndre Swift for a future 4th round pick. Adam, we've reported on Inside the Birds that it's been described to us as what's called a situational backfield. Can you give our audience a little idea of what that might mean?
Yeah. So here's why we came up with this term. So Gainwell has become the back that we didn't think he would be. He's been sort of a grinding back, short yardage, goal line. By the way, one of the best short yardage backs in the National Football League by statistics, how it's measured over the last 2 years. So, okay, this is the role that they have for him. He's also been a 2-minute back, a 4-minute back. But now you've got Swift, who could handle some of the, not the short yards, but some of the 2-minute and the 4-minute, if they're behind in particular. And Penny, probably be a base down back when they want to grind out carries late in the game. It could be Gainwell and Penny. Now, Boston Scott, Jeff, as you came up with last year, and I always laugh at that, but it's probably true. You never know from game to game what he's going to do other than playing special teams, but it's really the 3 main backs, Gainwell, Penny, and Swift. Penny's the X factor because his ability to catch the football. Now, I know today it's going to be interesting. We should mention it may rain today, but the fact of the matter is Swift was brought here in a trade from Detroit to catch the football. Gainwell and Rashad Penny are the guys who are going to carry the football, and occasionally Boston Scott. It's a situational backfield depending on down and distance, situation. Is it short yardage? We know who that guy's going to be. If they're behind, we know the 2 backs it'll be. And if they're going to be up in the fourth quarter, which will happen a lot in the game, you're going to see Penny and Gainwell. This is the situations and the way they're going to look at it. And by the way, this is what we saw in training camp.
Jason, this is a pretty impressive array of talent, different types of talent. How's this going to work out in your mind? Did all harmony and guys have roles and they get their roles?
I know Rashad Penny was pissed when he saw the trade to right? Like, dude, I'll get his carries automatically go down 50%, right? Just with that, that trade. Another thought of mine is, and this is like kind of a tangent, but Boston Scott got to learn how to catch punts. If he learns how to catch punts, he will never be out of a job. Because he has too much value to the run to the backfield. If he can learn how to catch punts.
Well, as long as the Eagles are playing the Giants twice a year, he may all have a job anyway.
It was just a thought in my mind. When I see him, I'm on to tell him that. Okay. Here's my thing. DeAndre Swift is a bigger Miles Sanders that catches the ball better, right? Both of them are in that that high 4.4 range. And to be honest, when you have a guy like DeAndre Swift, I think it kind of nullifies Kenny Gainwell. I like when I see it, because he can run the ball and he can catch it out of the backfield. I don't see that. I don't see the need for Kenny Gainwell as much anymore because you have DeAndre Swift. And I don't know, Greg, if you see it the same way. I just think that DeAndre Swift is more of a complete running back.
I mean, you can make the argument that in the context of an offense, they'd be used in a very similar fashion.
Yeah.
And that's what you're ultimately dealing with. I mean, but we'll see, because Swift has been hurt a lot, but if he can stay healthy, then, he's not going to get 20 carries a game. Obviously, they don't see their offense built that way, but he is an explosive back. He's probably more purely explosive than Gainwell. Not probably, he is. And he does catch the ball well. So in a sense, you're right, Jay. He does what Gainwell would be asked to do, but if he's healthy, he probably does it better.
Yeah.
Greg, is there anything that the Patriots do defensively, or that you would expect them to do defensively, that would dictate whether you'd rather have a grinding running back or a pass catching running back for certain down and distances? I mean, I know when some teams play too high, you want to run against that, right? When some teams bring a safety in the box, you want to pass a little bit. Or if they blitz, you want a running back who can catch the ball out.
The Patriots, as we all know, and Bill Belichick, is very opponent specific. So, last year they played a lot. When they did play split safety last year, it was predominantly on first down. You're going to have to account for the Hurts run game. So, how he chooses to do that, we don't know for sure, but there's going to have to be an extra defender for sure that is actively involved in the run game, so whoever he chooses, they play a lot of big nickel too. I think, like we said, Mills will probably be at safety. They'll play Mills. They'll play Duggar. They'll play Phillips. They'll play Peppers. They rotate in and out a lot of different players and a lot of different packages. And keep in mind, they got a really good defensive front. We know about Matthew Judon, okay? But one player, when you watch the tape of their defense, that's never talked about, and I was kind of blown away because I watched a ton of their defense this summer, was Dietrich Wise, number 91. He is a really, really good football player, and he shows up on tape. So they've got a really good front. And again, when you get to longer yardage, Jeff, they stunt a lot, and they're really, really good at it, and they're very multiple with their stunt concepts. It'll be very interesting to see how Cam Jurgens handles this.
Yeah, we're going to get to him in 1 second. I want to take a second to remind everybody, our production team, we have a great production team. James and Zach, they are back, and they're behind the wheels again, bringing Inside the Birds pregame live to you in high definition with the graphics, the videos, and more. And we just really want to thank them for everything that they do behind the scenes to bring the show to life. They are wonderful, and we would not be what we are without James and Zach. So thanks to both of you guys. Really appreciate it. Audience can't see you, but we want you to know how important you are to this show. Back to the football talk. You're right that the only other major change outside of the running backs is the right guard. Out is Isaac Seumalo, who's now with the Steelers. He signed a free agent contract there. And second-year pro Cam Jurgens takes over that spot. Now, Cam, out of Nebraska, where he played center for 2 years, was drafted to be the eventual replacement for Jason Kelce. But Jason Kelce is like the Energizer Rabbit. He just keeps going and going and going. And so here we are in year 2 of Cam Jurgens, and he is your right guard. Now, Adam, the Eagles drafted an interior lineman. Well, they drafted Tyler Steen, who played tackle at Alabama, but they envisioned him as an interior offensive lineman, a guard who would compete with Cam Jurgens and Jack Driscoll to start right guard. But it was never really, truly a competition, or I could say the competition was decided very early in favor of Cam Jurgens. Why was that?
Yeah, so one of the things we noted on our show was before training camp, Jurgens has clearly had off Steen. Steen, the technique that you go from left tackle to right guard is just different. Playing inside was harder for him, and he was just behind, and he never could catch up. And as he said, there was really never any competition. It was kind of surprising, though, that they didn't give much a better of a chance, but it's all strictly based on the way the guy practiced, and he was just too far behind. Now, the one thing I'd say about Jurgens is, and this is only his 4th year playing offensive line, we have to understand that he's also new. Yes, he was with the Eagles last season. He has very limited experience as a professional at this level, playing as a starter. In fact, this is really his first year as a starter. So there are going to be some times where it just doesn't look as good. I know, talking to the Browns, they felt that first day of the joint practices, Jeff, they got to him. I mean, I understand the Eagles didn't show up that day. They just didn't have a good practice overall,
right,
because of the football. But specifically, they said they handled Jurgens. They put Jurgens on his butt. Second day, he was much better. So let's see how, and Greg just talked about it. Let's see, because the Patriots are pretty stout up front. Let's see the power, how he deals with that in this practice, because he's more of an athlete. I know he's put weight on. That doesn't guarantee you're any stronger. So This is the matchup we're going to look forward to watching today.
Yeah, and Jay, you know how important that communication up front, you know how important this offensive line is to the team and how good it is, right? You're now going up into a very loud stadium. It'll start to, the Sunstead, the Tom Brady retirement. It's going to be loud there. It's going to be noisy. I imagine the silent count will come into play. And as Greg mentioned, you're going up against a Patriots front that's going to twist, that's going to stun. It seems like there's a lot there for Cam Jurgens to have to process and sort through. And that's a spot that I think gets underrated when Isaac Seumalo was there, for how important he was to Jason Kelce with what they're seeing, the communication, the tap, everything in the silent count involved.
I think Jason Kelce is the key person, because we've seen, as much as we love Big Z, we've seen a lot of guys shuffle in and out of the offensive line.
True.
2 guys that have been the studying forces have been Lane and Jason Kelce. So I think that Jason Kelce can handle it, and I'm sure that he'll be prepared. You don't worry about the snap count with the center that's converted to guard. I don't think that guy should be jumping off sides that much, because if you can keep the count as a center, you can do it as guard.
Yeah.
And I don't think that should be a big thing for you. But being in a new role, will it have its effects? We'll see. But I think that if any guy can get him on the right page, and remember, this is a 2nd round pick, I believe, Cam Jurgens.
Yeah, a high 2nd round. I think 51 overall. Yeah.
So I definitely think that he'll be suited for this. He definitely has the talent for it.
All right. One thing that really jumped out to both Adam and I as we did our preview last week, our podcast, is that the Eagles really don't have on the 53, and they didn't elevate one from the practice squad, a true backup center. They have Cam Jurgens, who can slide over if Jason Kelce gets hurt or needs to come out. But the surprising thing is the Eagles have always talked about they don't like doing that in the middle of a game. But it seems like if that were to happen today, if Jason Kelce, for whatever reason, has to go to the sideline, then you would have to imagine that Cam Jurgens would move over to center, and then right guard probably Jack Driscoll. Greg, does that surprise you that that is their sort of MO for this? And it's not really what they've done in the past.
You know, that's a training camp thing, and they obviously feel comfortable with it, Jeff. So, you know, it's hard to say it's good, bad. We don't know. You know, they feel comfortable. Look, you know, obviously Kelce has not missed much time. You never know, but they feel comfortable clearly that if that were to happen, that it wouldn't short circuit their offense. I guess let's hope we don't have to find that out.
Yeah.
And Kelce is the Energizer Bunny. And I just think that it gives you life in more years when your quarterback is growing and developing and you're winning.
Gotcha. Yeah,
you know,
definitely.
You know, I say with Coach Reed, but Coach Reed's on his 25th year. I don't see him retiring anytime soon until Patrick Mahomes gets old. that guy kind of gives you. And same way with Jason Kelce, I think Jalen Hurts is giving Jason Kelce more life.
I imagine so. All right. I want everybody to check out our friends at phlsportsnation.com. They're enhancing the fans' experience with their coverage of all Philadelphia sports teams. For the fan, by the fan is their motto. So make sure you check them out at phlsportsnation.com and on Twitter at phlsportsnation. All right. So I think one of the most fascinating matchups, and we want to get back into sort of third down and what the Eagles are going to do in the passing game, is the Eagles' weapons. And they've got Devontae Smith, they've got A.J. Brown, they've got Dallas Goedert against a Patriots defense that is known for being built almost back to front. Not that they don't have great front end personnel, but Bill Belichick has always placed a high price tag on his secondary. They've got some really good players. Kyler Duggar, the safety out of Lenore Ryan, right? Come to his own, nice player. Christian Gonzalez, first round pick that we've mentioned. And then there's this fact that Adam and I discussed on the podcast this past week. Greg, there's this Bill Belichick factor where if you give this guy some extra time to prepare, he's probably going to have a few things up his sleeve that maybe you haven't seen before. Adam and I mentioned that. Adam, what was it specifically you were told from a coaching? So go through that story.
Yeah, it was actually John DeFilippo.
DeFilippo, right?
Flip said that in 2018, when it was the OC for the Vikings, he brought out a defense they had not seen them do on tape. It was a walk around where the linemen would all stand up. Sometimes they wouldn't even play with their hand down, and they would just move around the formation.
The amoeba defense.
Well, maybe okay, right.
Defense.
Right, and John had not seen Bill do this based on their tape setting, and their pro guys didn't know this. They didn't have it in their scouting report. So from a coaching standpoint, he had to adjust going forward, and that game was tough. So I wanted to bring that up because people think this stuff is overrated. And I laugh at that. I'm like, this guy's had all off season. That's with the install. So you know that they're going to try to bring something different. I think this is a great test overall, Jeff, for Hurts here and the offensive coaches, because you know that they're going to do something different. We'll see how the Eagles adjust.
Yeah, that's exactly what's going to happen. There's going to be something different. Don't forget, Jay knows this. As soon as the schedule comes out, people in the building are working on game one. You know, that's the way it works. And in fact, they work on the first quarter of the season, but game one in particular. So Bill Belichick, and again, this doesn't mean he's going to win. That's not the point I'm trying to make. But the point is that he has studied the Eagles offense in such excruciating detail that he knows everything they do. Now, don't forget, the Eagles have coaches too. They're going to do some things that, you know, and don't forget they have a different coordinator, which I think the overall structure of the offense will stay very similar, but you just don't know how Brian Johnson in specific situations will go about doing it, which will probably be different than Shane Steichen. You know, that's just the way it is with coaches. But as Jay knows for sure, but you know, there's no question Belichick will have something that's a little different than what the Eagles have seen on tape, or he'll do something conceptually that's the same, but he'll get to it in a different way so it doesn't look the same. Because there's not 1,000 concepts. It's just how you kind of get to a lot of things.
Yeah, the most prepared game that you'll have in NFL is game one.
Yeah.
The reason is because all of your OTA training cards and all that stuff is the first opponent's defense, right? So offensive, all of those cards and looks that you see in OTAs and training camp, they usually they're putting in these cards and it's for like the Patriots, and they tell you, hey, this is going to be Patriots week. I know back in the day it would be Patriots week of OTAs. Oh, then it was then it was your division opponents. Oh, this is going to be the Cowboys week, or this is going to be in like, so you went through that. But the Patriots get and the Eagles for the prospective teams, they're going to get a lot of attention. So again, you have a bunch of young players. I'm curious to see how Belichick is going to attack that. And there's some things that you can just automatically know. It's going to be hard for the Eagles to run the football against the Patriots. It's always been harder for teams to run the football against them. And yes, they have some guys on the back end that are veterans. Jonathan Jones is a very good player. It's going to be a formidable matchup for our guys. That nickel guy, and Greg, who do you think that's going to be? You think Marcus Jones?
Now Marcus Jones is 5'8". I loved him coming out of Houston. He's just small, but he's an explosive athlete.
Tough matchup when you're 5'8" against some of the Eagles guys, though. Yeah. I would think
that may be a guy, if you can get him in situations. It's hard to get a guy out to get him to change, but if you can get that guy out and figure out a way to get that guy on AJ Brown, it'd be great.
Now, they did play Miles Bryant in the slot a ton last year. He could also be the slot guy. That could also be a function of who they're playing against. As we know, Belichick does that. We know that one week a guy could play 50 snaps, and the next week he could be a healthy scratch. With Belichick, you never know. So it could be Miles Bryant, who's taller than Marcus Jones, just because of who the Eagles put out there.
All right, Jason, you played with Jeremy Maclin and Deshaun Jackson. You played with them. So you got the first-hand view of it, a bird's eye view, no pun intended. Adam, growing up in this area, you did get to see Quick and Carmichael play together. I mean, Harold was not in his prime the way Mike Quick was at the time, but you probably also watched a lot of Fred Barnett and Calvin Williams, right?
Sure.
And Greg, every week you watch Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, you watch Justin Jefferson and whoever, and you see some of the best Ayuk and Deebo Samuel.
This is a long lead into what?
Do you guys know where I'm getting with this here? When you talk about AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, I don't think there's any question that they've got the components to be the best Eagles wide receiver tandem in this franchise's history, and maybe the best in the league.
I would love to talk about Devontae Smith, and Jay, obviously knows far more detail about the receiver position, but I really watched Smith closely about 2-3 weeks ago. And I got to tell you, I came away with such an appreciation for him. He does something that Justin Jefferson does. And again, it's not an apples to apples, but I think, and I actually had this conversation with Mike Quick when I was out at Eagles camp. And obviously Mike Quick knows receivers pretty well too. Devontae Smith has the ability, which, I'm sure a lot of people maybe didn't understand when he came out, because everybody was worried about his weight, and I fell into that category as well. So I'm not going to separate myself and say, hey, I knew better than anybody else. But he's got the ability to cut without slowing down or shortening his stride. He can cut incredibly sharply. So if you talk to DBs, and I work with one, Darius Butler, so everything looks the same. So so his ability to do that, because so many receivers, and Jay, jump in here, please, they have to sort of slow down or they change their body position when they're about to break. He doesn't do any of that. He looks exactly the same. He doesn't have to slow down or shorten his stride. And you may remember this conversation, Jeff, because at the Super Bowl, I remember you guys talked with TJ Houshmandzadeh. Yes. And I talked to him as well. And he said something that really struck me, and Devontae Smith is great at this too. An overlooked element of running routes is the ability to stop without taking, 5 or 6 steps to stop. Mm-hmm. And Devontae Smith, given how long-legged he is, he can stop. And, I just came away watching his tape thinking this guy is such a good NFL receiver.
Yeah. And you're right. And he's a technician. And that's what you love about Devontae Smith, is that, yes, he has athletic ability. We've seen him go up against Washington first couple games of the year and just calling in over guys, right? That's one of the things that he can do. But when you have a guy that's nuanced at the line of scrimmage and understands his body positioning, that he's giving away indicators, and how can a guy that's willing to study and say, when I run this comeback route, I give away this indicator. How can I eliminate that?
Right.
You can tell that he goes to the drawing board to figure himself out. And that's what Greg is talking about, eliminating all indications of him breaking. That's it. And then when it comes to stopping, and I talked to Houshmandzadeh too, and this is something that I had to learn. It should take a receiver no more than 4 steps to stop. The great ones, you will never see them take more than 4 steps to stop. The great ones. Now, those 4 steps, it can look like 3 every time because there's a way that you can position your foot where that first step is your break step and you can't tell. And learning this is one of those things that guys just don't. They'll sit out there and patter 5 or 6 times.
Yep.
And the guy that can learn how to cut that down, which DeVonta Smith has, it's priceless. So we add that to his athletic ability and nuance. Now, we all fall into the category of his body type. He's continually adding. If he continues to show himself and get stronger, the only thing that you can do is move him off his area at this point. If DeVonta Smith continues to get stronger, there's literally nothing you will be able to do with this guy at all.
Mm-hmm. That's
he had the most targets last year. I don't know if anybody would know this. The most targets of any receiver in the league last year out of empty formations. So that I thought that was very, very interesting because I don't think most people think of the Eagles as an empty formation offense, but he had the most targets of any receiver in the league out of empty.
Interesting. And what would that indicate to you, Greg?
Well, he almost always lined up in the same spot in empty. He lined up in the slot to the twin side, the 2 receiver side. And that's a really good way for the Eagles to do it because that's not the passing strength in empty. So what would very often would happen is you'd get the nickel to the passing strength to the 3 receiver side, and you'd get a lesser defender, pass coverage defender to his side. And if a team were to play nickel, let's say, I can remember a play specifically against the Vikings, and we're going to be talking about them. Totally different defense this year, so it might not be relevant. But I remember last year he caught a 19-yard completion week 2 out of empty where he was slot to twins, and Kendricks was covering him. You know, and it just you end up getting really positive matchups.
Gotcha. Someone asked us before we sort of close this out with our player of the game picks and our score predictions about X factors. We had a question about an X factor in this game, and I thought that that's a good opportunity not to go around and say who's your X factor, but to talk about Olamide Zaccheaus, who is new to the team and was known in Atlanta for catching pretty much everything thrown at him. A guy who can catch the ball over the middle and make something happen after. What have you seen from Zaccheaus?
Well, so I've looked at most of his games, right? So from Atlanta. The one thing that I'll say about this is that, yes, he catches the ball at a high level. However, it's all in open spaces. I can find few snaps where he has bump press man coverage because he lines up so tight to the line of scrimmage and he's usually running on open air. So it's hard for me to evaluate a guy like that and know his actual value because you can't see him with a guy in front of his face and tough catches. I haven't seen him make a bunch of tough catches. Usually they're end zones or they're deep down the field where he's running a post corner or deep out or something like that, and it's in a zone coverage. So it's kind of hard to evaluate or assess him. So I don't necessarily know how he compares to Quez. I know Quez is a much more athletic player, but Olamide Zaccheaus is definitely going to be used in this offense. I don't know to what extent, but like to me, it's very, very hard to evaluate this guy. I don't know if Greg can he has something that he's saying, but it's always like tight line of scrimmage. Let's get him off of bump coverage because he's a smaller guy type of thing. It's like that's the mindset going into the game.
Well, my thought, Jeff, when you talk about him was, will we possibly see some more, motion and movement in the Eagles offense? Someone like Olamide Zaccheaus can be a motion guy because you want him to get free access off the ball. He's not a pure burner, but he's got really good short area quickness and burst. You want to get him free off the ball into his routes. So again, whether this could be something Brian Johnson has looked at, obviously Zaccheaus wasn't here last year, so it wasn't a factor, but motion really helps in that regard.
Awesome. Yeah. All right. Well, let's finish this off. Go ahead, Jay.
When you're considering motion, and here's the thing, when I say that, yes, he's a guy that you would use like a smaller guy Deshaun Jackson, put him in motion, but how many resources do you want to put into calling all of that out for a guy that's going to play 25, 30, 40% of the snaps, right? I want to put that energy into an A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith rather than an Olamide Zaccheaus.
Sure. Olamide, my friend. Olamide. It says it in his Twitter handle, Llama Day.
Does it really?
If you're Llama Day. So we'll get that. By the way, I butchered it at least 100 times.
I know it because I
I
did that Falcons highlight film a couple of years ago.
Nice. From here, man, from Philly.
Let's do it. Let's close it out with what we do best here. We'll get to our players of the game and then our score predictions. I want to remind everybody that following the game today, there will be Inside the Birds post-game live. Adam, myself, and a new addition to the show, former Eagles tight end Clay Harbor, who will also be doing a show with Greg Cosell in the middle of the week as well on the Inside the Birds platform.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, we're adding. Oh, and by the way, why don't we just take the time right now to address the rumors? The rumors are out there. So I will let Jason Avant speak. Will Q&A be back this year on the Inside the Birds platform?
It will be back. Now, we don't have an underwear model in Clay Harbor, but we'll be back.
The Bachelor.
I think your audience will appreciate that you and Quentin will not underwear model. That'll be all right.
Thank you very much.
By the way, nor will I, Jeff. So,
oh my God, don't even. Oh,
I know that's a terrible visual, but
we're going to start an only Eagles fans account for you, Greg.
You didn't just say that. You did not just say that. Oh, you fake.
All right, with that, we'll get to our player of the game. I'll start off with Jason Avant. Who's going to be the player of the game today?
I'm going Jalen Hurts. I know it's
cop out.
Yeah, cop out. Right. I'm going Jalen Hurts. First game.
Okay,
back.
Big game for Jalen Hurts. A couple touchdowns, 3 or 4.
Justin Fields had a pretty good game versus Patriots last year. And I see some openings there.
Okay. All right. Greg, who's your player of the game? I mean, you already waxed poetic about him.
I'm going to go with my bromance, Devonta Smith.
There you go. Devonta Smith. All right. Big game for Devonta Smith. Now, coincidentally, Adam and I, we do not coordinate this, but we had the same tactician mindset going into the game. We know the the Patriots are down hurting at right tackle. So Adam, who did both of us pick as our player of the game?
My favorite Eagle, number 94, Josh Sweat, who's just what a story he's been of development. He can handle this offensive line. And look, remember Reddick now is playing with this wrap on his hand.
Yep.
So we don't know how well he'll do at least the first game back. And Sweat brings it every single game. We don't talk enough about what he does that happens very consistently. He's just such a good football player. Great story of development. And it starts today in Foxborough.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I think this is a guy who could have even as many sacks, if not more, as last year. I think he gets better every year. I picked Josh Sweat also to be the player of the game, knowing that the Patriots are hurting at right tackle, and he's going to line up over right tackle a whole bunch, and we'll see him feast. So we'll get now into our pick, our score prediction. Again, the Eagles were 3. It was 4 throughout the week. It dropped to 3.5, I believe, going into today, and 44.5 as an over-under. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly. Maybe if that was the Ramondre thing or not. But either way, Eagles still favored on the road. So, Jason, I'll start with you. Who's going to win this game? What's the score?
I have the Eagles in a close game, 24-20.
24-20. So you got a cover and an under. There you go. Greg, what's the score?
Believe it or not, I actually remember my score, Jeff. Can you believe it?
I feel like you have it written on your hand, Greg. That's what
I don't actually. I don't.
Okay.
27-17.
On your wristband. 27-17. Okay.
27-17. Greg says.
That's a big win.
Yeah. That would be my quick math tells me that's 44, right? Points.
Yep.
So that's right under the. So that's a cover and an under as well. Adam, who do you have winning?
I got an ugly game. I got Eagles 22, Patriots 16. It right now looks like it may storm there, but maybe end earlier in the game than the first half. But there's some plays in this game you're going to shake your head, but in the end, the better team is going to win, and that's the Eagles.
It's week 1. There's going to be a lot of weird stuff today.
Yep.
Yes, that's true. All right, and I'm going to make it a clean sweep for the Eagles as well. As far as this panel is concerned, I have the Eagles winning 26-16. I kind of get the vibe that it'll be kind of close going into the half, and the Eagles are going to pull away in the second half. Fellas, it's been fun. Week 1 in the books of this Inside the Birds pregame live. Big thanks to Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City, Sky Motor Cars, PHL Sports Nation, our production team of James and Zach. They're awesome. Thanks to our audience, all of our new listeners and new viewers, our Patreon members. Make sure you check out coverage of today's game immediately after on Inside the Birds post-game live. Again, myself, Adam Caplan, new guest, former Eagles tight end Clay Harbor, and of course, make sure you read Andrew DeCecco's observations on InsideTheBirds.com. So for Jason Avant, Greg Cosell, and Adam Caplan, I'm Geoff Mosher. Thanks for watching another Inside the Birds pregame live. Enjoy the game.